John Brothers from MassBioEd, and really great to see so many familiar faces and looking forward to making those new connections Jared was talking about. MassBioEd has been working with Ryan Helwig and his team at Teconomy Partners for many years to share the outlook on employment and life sciences here in Massachusetts. They've been great thought partners in analyzing and presenting the data. I'm excited to welcome Ryan for the very first time to report in person this year on our Employment Outlook report. And if you haven't had a chance to, please scan that QR code so you can download it and take a look at it. So following Ryan's presentation and a very short break, I'm afraid, a very short break, we will have a breakout session right next door to take on questions about the employment outlook, as well as hear the perspectives of leadership from industry, education, and government. So please bring your questions to that outlook session. I will tell you, I think the hardest decision everyone has to make today is to pick a breakout session, because we have 4 amazing sessions planned coming up after our break. So please take a look at those, because they're all really good. But it's my pleasure to introduce Ryan Helwig from Teconomy Partners to talk about our employment outlook today.
Well, thank you, John. Thank you, Sunny. Thanks to the MassBioEd team and all of you for the opportunity to be here today. Really appreciate the opportunity to sort of unpack some of the highlights and high points of what we've just released this morning with the employment outlook. I'll just say in my thanks to MassBioEd, the work you all do is so important. We work across the country and even somewhat globally in life sciences assessment and strategy and impact work. And we often hold MassBioEd and the work you're doing up as a best practice because this work is so important. We need people like MassBioEd convening around this. We need folks in this room, obviously across the pipeline and the talent ecosystem to ensure our companies can continue to do the important work that they do. Do we have the slides? Because unfortunately, I'm going to hit you with a bunch of data for those. Hopefully, you've had your coffee this morning. I guess I can advance. There we go. There's a report cover. So, like I said, I will hit some high points. We always start the work, from a broad perspective and narrow down. So it's important to start from an industry trends perspective, and we actually start more broadly in this sort of first context, in this first slide, just to set the context and share sort of the overall trends driving the demand for talent and workforce. So when you look at this slide, we're including biopharma, manufacturing, we're including medical labs. That's sort of what MassBioEd sees as the core of the industry in their purview, but this also brings in medical device and equipment manufacturing and some key slices of R&D activities and clinical research from our colleges and universities and from our hospitals and research hospitals and academic medical complexes. So as you can see, that's certainly not the entirety of the collegiate or hospitals workforce, but we're pulling out that slice that really overlaps on talent demand for clinical research professionals, for lab technicians, for data scientists, for medical scientists with our private sector industry. And consistent with a broader trend we're seeing nationally in many of the states we're working in, Massachusetts has seen sort of this slowdown in that rapid growth trajectory that we've reported on for a number of years now, whereas we were growing 2, 3, even close to 4% per year in net job growth, net new job growth. We flattened out in the last couple of years, but to double down on the Secretary's point and many of the points you've heard this morning, this certainly does not mean the agenda lightens for any of you on the talent perspective, and we'll talk about a lot of the underlying churn that's happening underneath that sort of top-line trend, and that'll be a good conversation in our breakout discussion. But this is something that's happening nationally with a number of factors contributing. This slide just gets at some of the underlying trends we're seeing across the different sectors, really characterized as sort of a mixed performance. We have seen growth in that research component, that labs component of our colleges and universities, but that's been offset by some other declines. But overall, we're characterizing this as a really flat change for life sciences, and you can see relative to the country, it's very similar or the same. It's actually very similar over the last 2 years, since 2023, as our overall private sector in Massachusetts, which has been very much flat in its net job growth. Again, we'll talk about this in the breakout, but there's a lot of uncertainty and sort of pause, but not a pullback, I would say, as we think about hiring around new jobs. But there's definitely this underlying churn that keeps the demand side very strong. So what sets Massachusetts apart? I mean, many of you live this, you know this. There's been good discussion this morning, and it's very important to have that color with the data. But on the left side of this, we are a very high-skilled life sciences cluster in this leading global hub that is Massachusetts. When we talk about high-skilled jobs, these are jobs that tend to require a 4-year degree or higher for entry, for starting points. The life sciences, as you all know, nationally is very high-skilled. There's a demand for top talent. But that's really on steroids here in the Massachusetts industry cluster. And really, that places an especially important emphasis on post-secondary education and credentials. Upskilling and reskilling is an important part of this agenda. But we are very top talent heavy with senior scientist professionals and others really leading this R&D and innovation engine for the world. But it does speak to the value proposition of Massachusetts Life Sciences Cluster relative to the nation, to other states, and frankly to the globe. It's very STEM intensive as well. Again, probably no surprise to you all as we look at this biopharma and medical labs core. About almost 2 out of every 3 jobs is in a STEM field. Again, nationally, that's very important for life sciences. But it's extra concentrated here in Massachusetts. And how does that play out? As you look at this graphic, we've got Massachusetts on the left side and the U.S. on the right. This is our composition of workforce. And the STEM and the high-skilled really jumps out at you as you look at that top grouping around scientists. We're 13 percentage points more concentrated than the nation. Management talent, engineering talent, computing and IT talent, and scientific technician talent, very importantly, all areas in which our state has a greater share of employment across the industry relative to the country. Where we differ is in production, and I know we've had a good discussion this morning. We know Massachusetts is a life sciences production and manufacturing state. We'll talk about some of the growth there, but when you look at the state relative to other state hubs, regional hubs, and national concentrations, it really jumps out at you the importance of top talent. So as we look at trends and how this composition has changed over time, a lot of the share composition hasn't changed in recent years in Massachusetts when you look at this biopharma and medical labs core of the industry. But we are, importantly, working with MassBioEd to help them understand where we're seeing some growth trends, where we're seeing more flat performance, and where we're seeing some declines. Areas like life scientists overall have been flat since 2023, so this is over the last 2 years. But you have to get under the hood, and we're going to talk about this in our breakout. You can see in the data the biochemists and medical scientists who are really the leading areas of senior scientific talent in the state. Those have continued to grow. We're seeing declines in chemists. So some of this, you really have to get under the hood. It's not monolithic. Similarly, in computing and IT, that growth has been really flat, but we're seeing a continued demand and an increased demand for software developers and development skills. In some of the growth areas, engineering, we're seeing a significant rise in the demand for bioengineering professionals and electronics engineers. very important in deploying technologies within our manufacturing and R&D environments, as well as innovating themselves. Production workers, we're seeing a steady demand for operators across the production workforce. Very impressive 7% overall growth in the production workforce since 2023, and very important for the MassBioEd agenda as we look at biomanufacturing operators and professionals, being hugely important. Maintaining production lines, maintaining complex machinery in a highly regulated environment is a very important set of roles for the industry. So lots here happening, and again, we'll put a plug in for this session to do a deeper dive. We look at job postings, and this is one area we wanted to point out. I won't belabor what's on the left side as you look at industry job postings and some of the roles with the highest demand. We tend to see tens of thousands of job postings at any given time in this state for that steady demand for professionals across the industry. But I do want to point out on the right side, we like to look at those hard skills, those success skills. I really like that terminology used this morning. But what's hot? What's really rising in job postings over the last couple of years? Probably no surprise, areas like expertise in artificial intelligence and generative AI, areas like Databricks, our cloud-based platforms for collaboration in data sciences, machine learning and advanced analytics, but also this notion of being able to collaborate and work together cross-functionally. And we're actually in our discussions with companies across the country starting to understand about teams. Cross-functional teams have always been important, but now you're adding agentic AI to some of those teams, and how do we complement that? It's a very different dynamic. But certainly regulatory skills, knowledge, quality assurance continue to be very important. And these hot skills can definitely help inform our education and training agendas going forward. It's important to look at projections. MassBioEd needs to understand what's coming, and we use the best intelligence we have based on available state and federal industry projections specific to Massachusetts. These are often supplemented by private vendors and sources we use for more refined data. I know these look very linear. The folks in the state and federal projections areas don't try to time business cycles. They don't try to look at things like geopolitical conflicts or happenings. And so what you tend to see is a projection based on available data, based on a little bit what the past has looked like and what the expectations are going forward. But there continues to be a strong projection and expectation that the life sciences industry over the next 5 years will grow by a net 9.7% employment, well outpacing the private sector, and that's led by that top line in sort of our core biopharma manufacturing and medical labs segment. This would result in about 14,000 net new jobs over the coming 5 years, and hopefully help set some of the agenda going forward. I know this slide is dense. There's a lot here. I encourage you to look at the report and really unpack it yourselves. But when we talk about projected needs, it's very important, especially when the sort of headline takeaway from this work might be, hey, we've leveled off. We've got relatively flat performance the last couple of years. I want to remind folks of the strong demand for replacement jobs. When we talk about replacements due to labor force exit, retirements, leaving the state, maybe leaving the labor force for one reason or another. We need replacements in the workforce when folks transfer occupations. You may have been a biochemist and now you're working in management. You may have been a biochemist in the life sciences and now you're going to work in a different industry sector. There is the new growth component in blue you see here, but the point we try to emphasize and remind folks, and this has long been the case, is that replacement needs and expectations have long outpaced new growth even in high growth sectors and industries, especially with an aging population. So please, if you have any inclination to let your foot off the gas when it comes to the important work of ensuring a robust talent pipeline, let this be a reminder. We have hundreds and in fact thousands of replacement needs every year going forward for the next 10 years at least. You can see on the left side some of the areas that are expected to lead in new job growth, some of our scientific expertise, and certainly software development is expected to continue to grow, though we all know some of those dynamics are shifting in real time. But let's keep in mind this reskilling piece. We do tend to focus, at least at a high level, on the supply side of the equation. Post-secondary being, sort of relatively doable, if you will, to assess trends, to look at where we have outsized concentrations in our degree production. What we focus on are biological and biomedical sciences degrees and graduates. We include in that bioinformatics and bioengineering, biotechnicians and lab techs. What you're seeing is everything with an associate's level and above in those fields, but these are not professional degrees in the medical landscape, so keep that in mind. But the last few years, we've averaged, as an ecosystem, over 8,000 graduates per year in these life sciences fields. And Massachusetts really stands out overall as a share of our overall degree production at the associate's level and above. We're 38% more concentrated as a state relative to the country. So kudos to those in this room that work in higher education and have squarely focused on the life sciences. What I do want to point out importantly, and this is the first time we're starting to see this in this longer term trend, is that we're seeing just a slightward downtick in 2024 graduate levels. And this, to us, we sort of characterize this as the tip of the iceberg. We have long read, and many of you have, I'm sure, about the demographic cliff that this country is experiencing. I'm seeing it in my local school districts. We're seeing it at the national level in enrollments. So this is something we really need to pay attention to because, yes, a 1% decline in degree production is not highly significant, but we do expect this to ramp up in the coming years simply based on population and demographics. So we need to keep plugging the importance of post-secondary degrees, particularly in this ecosystem that's so reliant upon that. I do want to point out, these are the degree fields in which we are graduating folks in these life sciences relevant degrees. What we've got here on the chart is actually a summation of the last 3 years. We like to sort of group that and look at it as a combined cohort. But Massachusetts stands out, producing significant concentrations of the state's, or of the nation's, epidemiology program graduates, of the nation's biological technician program graduates. That tends to be an associate's degree, very important. And over 10% of the nation's biostatistics and bioinformatics graduates. So this is a nation-leading ecosystem in some respects, but I also know that you tend to see some bleed out or some attrition, certainly as we think about retention. So we do have a couple slides, importantly, on retention and where these graduates end up. I know this one's a little bit complex, but on the left side here, we've got a current snapshot of those working in the Massachusetts economy with a life science related degree. So these are degree graduates of any age. We measure in this data set about 236,000 over the last 5 years. And this, it models the flow into industry on the right side. So where are these folks working today? And as we look at the core, what MassBioEd really focuses on, the biopharma manufacturing and the medical labs core, about 1 in 5 graduates with a life sciences degree ends up in our industry, in our sort of core biopharma industry. You may say, wow, that's, impressive. Some of you may say, wow, that's relatively low. But this is part of this talent equation that's so important. This is why MassBioEd works so hard in the Mass Life Sciences Center to get into classrooms at early ages, make folks aware of these career opportunities in their backyard and really understand the opportunity here. Because guess who loves STEM graduates? Folks in finance, insurance, real estate, folks on Wall Street, folks in the information sector, or folks in the broader professional and consulting sectors. So we've got an agenda here to ensure that that flow continues and continues effectively into the biopharma and medical labs world. We can take another more recent snapshot on retention, but I have to explain that this includes only graduates of Massachusetts public institutions. This is a data set available from the Census Bureau. We're able to look about a third of post-secondary graduates in life science-related degree fields that we've just been looking at, and look at the share of those folks working in Massachusetts 1 year after graduation and 5 years after graduation. And again, limited to public institutions, which many of you likely know are probably more likely in general to include Massachusetts students and have that retention aspect. But it comes out with a pretty impressive 81% in aggregate retention of employed life sciences graduates 1 year after graduation. You can see in areas like the associates world, we actually ramp up over 5 years. Maybe it takes some time to get placed, but we have almost 9 out of 10 graduates working there 5 years after graduation. We have seen some increase in retention in master's and doctoral student retention. So these are data we got to keep an eye on as well. This world-class education and training ecosystem here, and we've got to retain those graduates in our ecosystem. So to start to wrap up, you'll see these slides in the report, certainly implications on the demand side and for reskilling. We have seen, and we do this work, again, nationally with groups like the Life Sciences Workforce Collaborative, this digital transformation we're hearing about with AI and advanced automation being implemented is really affecting job and skill needs. Computing and IT is expected to continue to grow. Our scientists need these skills. There's a real upskilling agenda around even our senior scientific workforce to be able to maintain relevance going forward. And things like hybrid skill needs continue to be in high demand. Our employers want folks who understand the science but maybe understand project management. They understand the science, but they need to understand and have digital skills and advanced analytics capability, cross-functional skills. We've got to continue to emphasize compliance in a continually iterating regulatory environment. And certainly on those replacement needs, I can't emphasize those enough. And finally, on the talent pipeline, we continue to generate a high volume. We're generating it at a rate, punching above our weight, if you will, relative to the country. But we've got this in-state retention agenda and ensuring that we're keeping all these qualified graduates in the state. I will put a plug in. There are regional data in the, some high-level regional data in the report for those of you interested in sort of what's happening across the state. But I will wrap it up here and